Le sommet international de l'éducation du futur réunit une soixantaine de conférenciers du monde entier. Des pionniers et des innovateurs issus du monde de l'éducation, bien évidemment, mais également des êtres inspirants, issus des chemins de sagesse ou des chemins d'apprentissage et de créativité dans différents domaines. Les arts, les sciences, l'économie, le lien avec la nature, le sport, etc. Des expériences et des chemins de vie qui sont un formidable enrichissement pour le monde de l'éducation. Le professionnalisme des traductions, en simultané, et l'incroyable richesse de toutes ces conférences offrent un horizon de point de vue vaste et varié, très complet, qui en font au final une véritable formation professionnelle pour les enseignants, les éducateurs et tous les professionnels de l'éducation, mais également une formation à la parentalité consciente et une formation individuelle à la vie consciente. Face à toute cette richesse et aux divers retours, nous avons décidé d'offrir toutes ces conférences à tous, partout dans le monde, en français et en anglais, quelquefois en allemand et en espagnol. Découvrez la vision d'acteurs audacieux et influents du changement, vers un monde éthique, solidaire, généreux et profondément respectueux de tous, des cultures, des peuples, des règnes et de la planète. Un incroyable panel de conférences, couvrant toutes les dimensions de l'éducation, pour un futur ayant du sens, une humanité épanouie et une terre qui respire. Une chose est sûre, votre vie, et à travers vous, celle des enfants, ne sera plus la même après avoir écouté toutes ces conférences. Pour avancer, nous avons besoin de vous, nous avons besoin de votre générosité solidaire. L'organisation du sommet et l'édition des conférences ont nécessité des milliers d'heures de travail et nécessitent encore beaucoup de temps et d'investissement. Nous faisons appel aux dons libres et spontanés pour compléter le financement du sommet et, si possible, continuer à l'enrichir de nouvelles conférences. Votre soutien est vraiment précieux et vital pour aller jusqu'au bout de cette aventure extraordinaire. Merci.
Olivier, I'm glad to welcome you. So I had a lot of talks with Olivier even before the summit meeting, and this as a preparation for this summit.
On a eu divers échanges et je suis ravi d'accueillir Olivier. C'est une des premières personnes.
It's the first person I thought of when I started organizing and thinking of the summit. It's great to have people who do not belong to the world of education and who nevertheless have a long-standing experience, who have a lot of things to share in education. So he's also delighted to join us, to participate, and through his enthusiasm and his passion for education. I was sure of that, of course. I knew he was very passionate about it, because you cannot teach adults without being passionate about passionate about education. So for those who do not know him, Olivier has translated hundreds of books, a very well-known author, Byron Katie, especially Miguel Ruiz. Also had an opportunity, a very particular experience with Miguel Ruiz, who put him on another pathway regarding the God and those old things that enable us. That enable us to express ourselves freely. And so Olivier is going to share with us integral teaching introduction to life. So Olivier, without any further ado, I'll give you the floor. So you have 1 hour and 25 minutes. So if there are some particular things, well, thank you, Abel. I'm really very delighted to be here. And also, I believe, also things were mentioned here. The Pacific Warrior, one of the first books that I've translated. I was only 22 years old. Also, a film was made out of it. And so it's very nice to be in this Congress and to see that this author is also part of it. Oh, I didn't know this story. Didn't know the story. So, so the people I thought of, and when I first tried, didn't work, and then finally everything ended well. Okay, then. Do you need to share things on the screen? No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. So, well, of course, first, I would like to congratulate you for this adventure because getting together, inviting 55 speakers is not, of course, an easy task to do. Catherine, you have to switch to the French channel. I can also do it in English, but well, it would be meaningless, of course, if I did so. So on the bottom, interpretation, you pick French. If you hear English, then you're on the English channel. Does it work? Great. So I'm very happy to be able to attend and to make contribution in this framework, because very often I say people know me through all the books I've written concerning personal development and spirituality. Also, ever since 2018, I wrote 4 books for children, or the 5th is still under preparation. But the subject I'm passionate about, if I had to summarize it in one word, it is education, because it is important. Education is the education of children, of course, but it's also your own education, which has to be continued. It's a continuing story, a lifelong process, and all the problems also we're facing at a personal level, at a collective and a world level, these are very often linked, and if you go back to the first cause, to shortcomings in education. And afterwards, of course, as shown in the title of your summit meeting, so what is education? Education is being conceived, it's the reflection of what we have of a human being. So we can envisage education in a country, but there's a vision, of course, a vision of life, a vision of the human being, and a vision of the citizens who will become tomorrow. And if I take a particular case of France, but it is also true for many other countries today, we are in a culture, officially that is, that holds no longer spiritual dimension. So the education we receive in schools is reflecting this shortcoming. So we have an educative model based on one dimension, it's the intellectual, mental dimension. So we are really stuffed. All the years we spent on in school, so we follow the recommendation also of Montaigne. Children are not just bottles you fill, but it's a fire you rekindle, you put fire to, and some fire that can become bigger and bigger, and that has also been integrated. So the schools today, in conformity with this predominant vision, is mental, 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 the intelligent knowledge. So it's a total everything. It is being reflected in everything, but the spiritual things, we don't even mention them. So what I would like to contribute with is a totally different vision of humankind. So a vision that tries to see us in our globality, and then to try and strike a balance, because today we are making, let's say, people, but they are showing shortcomings, lacks of feelings, all the things which we live, which we learn from our bodies. This is still missing. Education should aim at making full human beings, balanced human beings that develop the four dimension. That for me is integral education. Perhaps we should dwell a few minutes on this concept. Ken Wilber, for instance, has an integral approach, but when I discussed with you, Abel, the integral education, for me, integral is that integrates and unites the whole human being. So our four dimensions: the physical body, the body, the heart, the affection, emotional, relational, the mental, the intellectual dimension, and then also, of course, the spiritual dimension itself. So these four dimensions I want to link with one another. And the heart is the water, the affection, feelings, etc. The mental is the air, dimension spiritual is fire. So for me, in an ideal world, real education should be an education that will give us elements on these four dimensions. So, well, one by one at the beginning. So the first dimension is your body. Is the body, and the body for me is totally absent in our education. So we can spend hours per day in what is really torture for some of us. Some need to move, but when you're being seated, it's like torture. But an integral approach would attach great importance to health. I'm saying this quite. I'm saying just in those very simple terms, the school is making idiots out of us, but most of us come out of school ignoring everything about health, which is quite amazing. If you think of hazing, well, all the rest is useless. Integral education, which learn is the basis of health, the basis of education, health education, also prevention. And prevention, then it has become this way today in the Western world. But prevention is an education, how to eat, how to breathe, how to move, how to know this body, which is something extraordinary, which we all have, and how we can take care of it so that it becomes in the best possible shape. If we take food, just look at how people eat. The very basis of a health education are not even given. So we learned a lot of things on history, geography, mathematics, but we don't even know how to eat in a healthy way. And what is important also is to respect the fact that we are all individuals. And what is true for me individually is not going to be valid or acceptable for someone else. So there are bases that can be given, but they need to be adjusted individually to each and every one of us. So Abel has disappeared because they have no one in front of me. I have the impression of talking to an empty class. So that's good that you activated your video, because, well, if not, I have the impression of being an artist and talking to myself. So when I was 20, I started taking interest in food, in eating, and I read a lot of books. But reading is not going to tell me how this particular diet will help me. So I experimented different combinations, Shelton, all categories of food, the Kusmin diet. Everything you need is being put in the same dish. So then I became a vegetarian, but also try to eat things without cooking. So I wanted to find out how food was acting on me, my body when I was 20. Now I'm 60, so everything is different. You change, but there are a lot of educational shortcomings. They don't learn us how to listen whom we are. They learn us how to sleep when the parents tell us go to bed, or parents tell us go and eat. So there's always a reference point, but we cannot do this as a function of what we feel. So here I'm hungry, I'm not hungry. This is appropriate, this kind of food, this is not. So we should learn, or they teach us this internal sovereignty. So what is appropriate, or what is good for us and for each and every age. So it is very important in our education at a very early age, and so that the others can live a healthy life. So when we talk about the cost of health, no, it's a cost of illness. The Ministry of Health is the Ministry of illness. And to see the astronomical amounts spent in order to maintain people healthy, it's quite worrisome. And it's not normal to spend that much. So the basic education prevention has not been done. Victor Hugo had this formula. He said, the money we save out of education will end up in the prison. So in the beginning, after some time, well, the people will behave inappropriately and will end up in prison. So the money that is not spent in education of health, in real prevention, well, it will be spent 10 times, 100 times taking care or curing illnesses. And therefore, I cannot sufficiently insist on it. And I'm also giving a wink to someone who played an important role in my life. At an important year, I was 2021, Dr. Christian Schaller in Geneva. In 77, it was much in advance. He created a foundation that taught teaching the people how to take care themselves of their health with courses, with training sessions, with a company, a corporate restaurant, even before the word bio even existed. So it's important because in a summit of education, it's important to tell those who listen to us that all relationships can be taught, spirituality, harmony, but even in a field which we ignore, but we learn, we train, and then you can acquire the basis. There's another thing to know. We're still on the first floor, in the first dimension, so your body, health, That's our own inside, internal ecology. It's our own environment, how we manage our own climate all by ourselves, and how we manage these billions and billions of cells we are composed of. And in ideal integral education, it's something that ought to be done at a very early age. So what is happening in my microcosm, my human body, and it's also the same for the macrocosm. So the planet will be living on, taking care of my health, but taking care of the class. So these are the two sides of the same coin. So when you decide all of a sudden that is chemistry, that would be the solution. But then all of a sudden we said, the chemistry offered a lot of solution, but now chemistry is killing a lot of things, entailing a lot of illnesses. And at the same time, on the one hand, we had all the alternative methods. The fact that we became aware of the health, and then another ecological movement. So both are linked to go together. And that's why I also include in this physical dimension the relationship to another element, to the environment in which we live, and also what we do together. Well, sometimes I say it's good to save the world, the rainforest, but at the same time, you still continue to smoke. Well, anecdotic, but you need a good internal environment, and then I will be able to do things at a larger and collective and global scale. One of the key words of integral education is experimenting. It's trying to let it simmer down in your heart. So there's the breathing technique. I'm transforming my footsteps and how it acts on me. So to know that it is done to be incarnated. It's like seeds. I can have an attic with 1,000 different species of fruit, vegetables, and whatever. But what I'm interested in is what is in your vegetable garden. So how to feed the family, your friends. You also have some flower just for the beautiful aspect of it, or the splendor of it, or just a full attic. But in your vegetable garden, you only have weeds. No, that's what we live through. It's what we incarnate. It's what we learn. And for those who have reincarnation vision, well, we go on living from life to life, and we bring along with us our richness, all the things we've lived through, our experience. So that for me is the first dimension out of the four I refer to. An education that imperatively has to go through education of personal health, but also taking into account the environment. My wife and me, we love animal documentaries. I believe we should show one of these documentaries at least once a week, because it brings along marvel and a new vision on the world, plants, animals, the world we live in, and progressively the view we have on the environment in which we live. The second plan in this integral education is the dimension of the heart.
And this dimension is lacking, even if I was saying that sometimes for The nonviolent communication is being taught in different schools with or seeing tentative to integrate some elements on the effect, on the relations dimension, but it's lacking on the whole. In my opinion, the heart dimension, the relationship dimension, is essential. And it is essential because what I am living, what I am feeling, is what counts the most. Because if I am unhappy, if I am unhappy in my relationships, if I am happy within my relationships, that will make the quality of my life. I can have wonderful friends, but if I am unhappy in my heart, if my emotional life is in chaos, then it won't work. And the experience I have is that this is one of the most important levies that we can use in our transformation. I dedicated 10 years of my life to the pardon. The pardon was about healing the injuries of your heart. And as the heart is between the head and the hands, that's between the action and the reflection. If the heart is injured, if the heart is suffering, I won't be able to have a positive thinking. I can't have a positive thinking if my heart is ill. And I'm going to somatize all these relationships that I can't recognize. When we are talking about psychosomatic pathologies, most of the time we are thinking my thinking has translated into my body, but no, that's water who did the Grand Canyon. And here it's the emotion that has been printed on our body. And that's something really important to understand and to know. And it should be a second priority of the education, that's to say, to have the teenagers, the children, to be happy. That's to say, to be able to identify their emotions. I guess the participants have seen this cartoon, Vice Versa, and it's really an example on the emotions we can have. Many of us, maybe most of us, were raised in total ignorance of what was happening with our emotions, our feelings. That's something I had to learn when I was a young adult. And while this is part of the things that are very important to learn from the start, and if I want to avoid to spread my negative emotions on the others while I am unhappy, then I'll have to learn how to do that. I was very lucky to translate a book from Marshall Rosenberg saying the words are windows. And reading this book, I discovered a huge vocabulary on emotions. As someone who really knows well wine, has a rich vocabulary in order to explain what he's feeling when he tastes wine. Here is the same. We have a lot of words in order to describe what we are feeling in our emotions, in our relationships. Too many people today, and particularly the leaders, many people are brilliant, but are really ignorant as far as the relationships are concerned. And they should understand their emotions in order for their ideas to be printed in a positive way without creating any conflicts or misunderstandings. So education on the heart, on the relationships, on the affect is an essential education. Today we are lucky We've seen a lot of approaches. I have spoken about the non-violent communications because it has been present during the last 20 years, but there are also other attempts. I have always been in favor of opening the program, the curriculum, and I am in favor of teaching different approaches because we all have a different sensitivity towards an approach or another. And it's also very important to be able to manage the conflicts. Someone in the relationships, on the relationships, to know what's happening, will be able to manage the conflicts. If we can imagine an ideal society in 20 years, it's not a society without conflicts, because conflicts will always be present and are not negative, but conflicts happen when we are not able to communicate. In an ideal society, will be able to explain that we don't agree, but will still be able to listen to the other's emotions. And I think this is essential. Today, we see many people lacking emotional experience, the fact that people can't listen to each other. We are lacking dialogue. We are lacking the fact that we are not able to manage any disagreement. But disagreements are useful, and there will always be disagreements. But it's important that we are given the keys in order to manage the conflict, to be able to transform the conflicts in something positive. If I have a stone, I can make fire. And a conflict that is well used can become something positive. And from a conflict, there is even a better understanding that can come from it. I think this is essential. And I would be very happy to see that to see integrated in the program a teaching about education. So I see that someone has raised one hand, and maybe I will wait for the end of the intervention in order to answer the questions.
Sur lesquelles on peut écrire ses questions.
D'accord. Alors, un autre élément que je voudrais inclure.
Another element I want to integrate in this kind of education, even it's going beyond what I said, there is something that could transform radically the education of our children and bring considerable, significant changes to our generation. With a small financial impact, we could integrate in the curriculum at least 6 months or even more, 1 year in another country. Because at this time, the heart, the emotions are really important. And there is also an opening for culture. Being able to spend 1 year far away from one's parents And it could be very interesting to do that between 15 and 18 years old. And when you spend a year abroad, when you discover a new language, a new way of eating, a new way of studying, a new climate, new landscapes, you have an openness of your mind, and that openness will always stay with you. So when you will be returning from an experience from 1 year to or 6 months, you will be transformed. And this opening is very important, and it will happen. It will be more important if it happened between 15 and 18 years old. You can imagine to do that at the European level. Let's imagine after the Second World War, we would have said that in the curriculum, in the education system, each student has to spend 6 months or 1 year abroad. I think Europe, the citizen Europe would have been built more fast. I am not talking about the political Europe. I am not talking about the economical Europe, but I am talking about the Europe of the citizens. And it wouldn't require a lot of investment. If I had to defend one political project, it would be this one, because I have seen that in many students who spent a year abroad. They have an open spirit, and this is part of the integral education that I am talking about today. So, okay, I will go on because I have many things to touch upon. So we've seen the body, the health. We've talked about the importance about the relationship dimension, the emotional dimension, and now we are reaching the third pillar, the spiritual level. So, as I said, that's maybe the only step that is taken into account in schools, but even there, the integral education has to be seen in a different way. It's not about knowledge. It's not about teaching to children informations. That's to teach them to make the difference between what is true and what is false, to show the discernment, to explain the discernment. The true discernment is essential in our world. Noam Chomsky, who has long been considered as the best intellectual, said, if we had a real education system, it would be an intellectual auto-defense lesson. So if we had a real education system, this would be an intellectual auto-defense lesson. So he was focused on that, and he didn't take into account the heart dimension, but he was showing this lack of critical spirit. We don't learn, we don't have all the keys that will avoid us to be manipulated by the others. We are living at a time when we are seeing that every day. When Noam Chomsky told about that, I have friends who are doing martial arts, and it's interesting to learn self-defense technique in case we are attacked in the streets, and I think not many people will use that. But what about intellectual attacks? Every day we are intellectually attacked, because you can't look at a media, an advertisement, without intention to orient you in a sense or another. What about the Nazi propaganda? they developed strategies of propaganda to manipulate people, and these strategies were particularly efficient, and that's the theme of the last book of Laurent Gounel, the Waking Up. And there is also another quote: manipulation is to democracy what violence is to the dictatorship. So it's important as quote. It means that in a political system that is supposed to give a voice to anyone, it becomes important for those who want to have an influence to know how to influence the thinking of the people. And I hear people telling me, no, I am not manipulated. So I recall you the meaning, the definition of manipulation. It means make you think or say something without knowing it. And so developing the intellectual and mental capacities of our students, it's not an easy task, but it is about giving them the possibility to defend themselves intellectually and how to manage all the information we receive and avoid to fall into the trap of someone's interest. We are living in an influence world of permanent manipulation, propaganda, and at the moment, these things are not taught at all, while I think these are essential if we really want to think freely. But it is very exhausting to do that. But if we really want to think freely, you need to go beyond emotional reactions. You know, we were talking about brainwashing, mental manipulation. In reality, if we want to manipulate someone, we will not focus on the brain, but rather on the heart. And we'll use emotions, fear, anger. We'll try to create emotions on the target people, because emotions are taking so much space that they will deactivate the discernment, the capacity to see what is true or false, and so they won't have a free thinking. And so the essential skill to acquire is to be able to understand these different relationships, and it requires a huge work to have to be able to think freely and not to fall into the trap of emotions. In French, we say, I have been under a wave of emotions. That's the thing. So in the water, you don't have the same vision as in the air. And so when you are under the influence of the strong emotions, you don't see as clearly as if you were in the air, but rather as you were under the sea. And so it's all about emotions. You should be able to say, okay, I am feeling that, so I am in this emotional state, and I am not able to reflect in a very clear way. So you need to take some distance to see things clearly and not taking decisions that depend on the emotions you are feeling. And instead of stuffing us with all this knowledge, we should explain, we should teach our children the skills to have the capacity to have discernment, to understand what's happening in my heart, in my head, and not being influenced by emotion. This is at the heart of freedom. There is no freedom if you are a victim of your emotions or if you are manipulated. And a last thing, if you are free mentally, you can see the same situation in very different ways. I think it's Fitzgerald Scott who said the sign of a superior intelligence is the fact of being able to see, to understand two points of view that are contradictory and to be able to continue. We have seen during the COVID-19 pandemic that there are different points of view. So yes, at school we all learned thesis, antithesis, synthesis, but it can't happen in the everyday life. You have to understand different points of view, and to make a synthesis out of it, you need to go beyond the differences. And this mental dimension that is not totally taken into account, at least in France or neither in the US, children are not taught to be free. It's all about knowledge and learning all this information, and this won't lead us into freedom of thinking. So now I'm going to talk about the second and the third pillar. If we are mixing the head and the heart, we'll obtain a belief. Our beliefs are about intellectual content, full of affect. And when I am talking about beliefs, I am not talking only about religious beliefs. I am talking about nutritious beliefs, medical beliefs. If you believe in homeopathy, allopathy, Ayurveda, Chinese medicine, we have the two sides. So a strong affect dimension as well as an intellectual dimension that will justify our beliefs. And while you are looking for your freedom, in order for the human soul to develop, it will be essential to be aware of these beliefs, and these beliefs will depend on your family, the country in which you have been raised, the religion of your family. So we are all shaped by all these beliefs. And sometimes we read books on that and we believe that we can get rid of our beliefs, but no, because we are attached to that. So if we give the keys to the pupils early enough, they will be more free to be open to other visions of the world, to other theories, instead of having a shaping that will take place very early. So it's important to take into account these beliefs that are playing an important role in our lives. I am always very surprised to see that people are not so interested in science, logic. Today, there is more scientism than science. And what is scientism? Scientism is about making a religion on science. I don't know if you know the creator of the concept morphic fields that has been taken into account in different domains. I met him 20 years ago in Amsterdam and asked, are you happy to see that in different scientists, many people have a speech that is closer to what is heard in the spiritual world? And he answered, you know, what I want today is to have a science that is really a scientific one, without the dogma, without the beliefs that impede to have real science. And 15 years later, he published a book named The Science that was not well translated in French. And in this book, he presented the 10 main beliefs under the science. And so he has been the first scientist that has been censured on TED. You know, TED, this website with all the conferences. While he is explaining the reality we are living, so he was explaining this religious dimension that is biasing the real science. And I think it's very important because it shows the lack of being able to understand what's happening in my heart, in my head, and to have a journey towards a free thinking with all the discernment you need. So we'll go on, we'll continue. So fourth and the last dimension, the spiritual dimension. So we are not in the traditional curricula anymore, because the spiritual dimension is not taken into account, because some people don't make any difference between what is spiritual and what's religious. So the science has made a break between what was between the religion and the science to have more freedom, and it is very good, but we need to know what is the religious dimension with fanatism, superstition, etc., and spirituality, which is totally different. Spirituality is about the world of the spirits, and it doesn't ask you to believe, but rather to practice. And it has a scientific side. It's not irrational, it's rather transrational, and has the same rigor as in science. The science is saying, if you mix this and this, you will have this. Okay, you have indications for physics, chemistry, and for the spirituality, it's the same. If you meditate this way, if you practice these exercises, if you do this or this yoga, you will reach these and these objectives of inner development. So the results in science are objectives, and the results in the, spirituality are only valid for us. If, thanks to my meditation, my inner work, I reach my goal, the results will be valid for me because they were verified by me, but maybe I could explain that to my family, to my neighbors, but I'm not sure if they do the same exercise that they will reach the same goal as I did. So spirituality is not about a belief, it's about an action. We are asked to act in order for us to feel, to understand, to have a huge love dimension, and to understand. And the spirit being one, we could say that the spirituality is a way to connect to our life, to connect to the fauna, the flora, the cosmos. On a spiritual dimension, you can add a religious dimension, you can add another dimension, but the spiritual experience has no shape because it hasn't to enter a mold. And so we could compare spirituality to electricity because you can feel, you can see electricity. The electricity, when it's through a lamp, it becomes light. When it's going through a heating, it becomes heating. When it's going through a car engine, then you have your car that is functioning. And this is the same about spirituality. When you have this spirit in your heart, you feel love and you feel happiness. And the most I receive the spirit, the most my capacity to act, to create, to make things work will work. And so spirituality is a way, a universal way to reach one's objective and then being able to integrate that in your living principles. And if you exclude this spiritual dimension from education, it's like removing the sun. While we all know that without sun, we can't live. And so neglecting the spiritual dimension, in my opinion, it's the same as forgetting the source, the tipping point. But you don't need to mix what was happening before the Enlightenment and after. We were very happy to have science, rationality, but we still need to evolve and we need to go beyond this intellectual and scientific vision, and the spiritual dimension in the integral education will allow each child, each student to discover, to understand the consciousness, the love, the depth, and to make a spiritual journey, an inner spiritual journey. And because of this mixing between religion and spirituality is about dogmatic, sectary systems, but you can teach the basics of spirituality and open your mind about the different approaches that are on Earth for 1,000 years now, in India, in Europe, in South and North America, by showing how this spirituality was in the different countries. And for me, this will open our vision on the essence of spirituality, which means understanding that we have one spirit. We have a huge diversity in our unity, so we should be very happy to see that we are all different, but we all have one life and one spirit. I think this way we are more aware, and being more aware will lead you to respect your environment and the others. So when I'm talking about an integral education, it's about integrating these four pillars. But I'd like to add some small points. Changing the education system, it's not only changing the branches, it's changing the way people are teaching, teachers are teaching. And I think there is a lack, something that is lacking, because in the relationship between the teachers and the pupils, this relationship is outdated. There is something to change the relationship between pupils and the teachers. If we don't want to see the children as a vase that we are filling up, we need to change our vision. We need to allow the children to be autonomous. I remember the first time I went to a Montessori school, I think it was in 1999 or 2000, I was very surprising to see 20 or 14 children. Each child was on a small mat and a small carpet doing his or her things, and there were some aspects that I was really interested in, because these children were doing what they wanted on their small carpets. And I think that in this pedagogy, they were teaching in another way, in an alternative way. And when you teach in another way, you don't fill the pupil with all your knowledge. You have to provide the pupil with all the keys, with a toolbox that will allow him or her to be autonomous in his or her life. And this can be tools about health, about relationships, about discernment, about many things. It's a way of teaching that is totally different, as the content has to be different also. And I was very positively surprised. There are plenty of conferences, and in general, the conferences are of about 15 minutes. And in general, you have an expert talking during 15 minutes, explaining an experience. And I learned to an astrophysician, the one who created the Quest University in Canada. And I was surprised, because he said, when we built this university, we decided to rethink everything. So we kept nothing from the basic idea of a university. And so they started from scratch, about the branches, the lessons, the relationship between the teachers and the pupils. For instance, all the teachers are at the same level. There is no hierarchy. and they reflect on the way to build this school in an innovative way. And the result is, and I saw this video 4 or 5 years ago, but 96% of the students had a job within the 6 months, because they have had a different teaching, and they had the necessary tools in order to live their life. Because I think today we don't need a radical change of the education system. There are plenty of reforms at the moment, but the program is still the same. We need to question, to challenge the program. We need to ask, what do we need today in order to prepare tomorrow's world? Which vision of the human being do we have? How do we want to teach that?
But at the same time, I'm telling you all this, well, unfortunately, we have systems very difficult to change. They tend to continue endlessly. And I don't know how we can really come to a real change. But I believe first and to dream about it, and all those who are developing new things, like all the different schools I refer to, in spite of everything, they prepare things that might enhance this kind of educational system, but it takes time. And as I did with my 3 boys, or also some people listening to it, that we can already start, or take a start within your family, that you share, that you fill in the gaps of education that exist today, where there's so many personal development trainings. Why are there so many sites that propose to the parents other educational keys? Why? Because there's a real need, there's a real want to do something different. I don't know when it will happen, but one day perhaps we'll come to this in a generalized manner. And I sincerely think that is a total reconstruction we have to proceed to in education, and not only a reform that will not change anything fundamentally. No, it's the way in which we pass on knowledge, etc. So that's what I wanted to present to you today. So this the global vision of an integral education that takes the human being in all its aspects. We have a body, we have feelings, we think, and whether we want it or not, we have a soul, a spirit, and we have a spirituality, but using the extraordinary richness that exists for each and every dimension. So thank you. When listening to you, we're talking about the different phases. That's like a rocket, you see. It's also in different phases when it's launched. So you're launching the new education vessel. Sylvie asked why this approach is not being shared and put into practice. Well, perhaps, there are a lot of people who put into practice all this, and they do magnificent work on earth and everywhere in the world. Some people who dare, some people who do completely different things. And of course, the real question is the question of change. Of course, there are a lot of situations in which you have an idea, or a better way of doing things. But it's as if we're not still living in a culture that enables you to do or to change the things overnight. It takes time. And we are all, let's say, in front of our keyboard. But this keyboard was conceived with the old, or copying the typewriter, the old typewriters. So before, if you type too fast, you crossed the letters, or when you went too fast, too fast, the ribbon got off. So it was done in such a way that that all the letters could be reached easy, but it's still, according to the example of the mechanical typewriter. But we continue to have a keyboard following this type, because bearing in mind or the way it was done, in order to use all your fingers, and the fingers with a lesser competence, such as the A, which are put on the outside of the keyboard. Well, but some things don't work. So if you want to talk about tomorrow's education, first, how can you introduce a culture of change and mobility? And today, well, there's still a lot of inertia. Olivier, there's another question, I believe. What are the other approaches when you talked about the CNV? What are the other approaches you were thinking of? Well, those things that can help the children a lot. It's a junction touching upon the four pillars. Not taking things personally, it's the heart. Not making any presumption, it's the mental part, and also doing your best. That's action, that's concrete. It's the main topic by Miguel. But there are four things where you can transform these four stages and doing such that it work for us. And there are other books. There were a lot of authors regarding the relational feelings, the affection, the Talman in Switzerland, who also wrote about all the basic competences you might need for this emotional and relational approach. The difficulty to change your belief, isn't this out of fear of leaving your comfort zone? Well, the comfort zone, if at a very early stage you took you want to become mobile and not to get attached to something, or to get attached to your rock like an oyster or like a snail that you need a knife to cut you off. But there's not only one way of thinking, one way of doing, but if there is only way you would getting attached to it, you don't want to leave it because it's comfortable. But once you open up, this, the fact that you can do something differently, you come back totally as a different person, also talking differently. This is also enhancing this fluidity, this lightness. So the comfort zone installs when you're staying for too long a time in the same place. Karen says that pedagogy and education in the open air in nature will also contribute to the 4 pillars. Yes, about 3 or 4 years ago, I met Eric Julien, who he created a school in the middle of the forest, and he made a presentation. It was very interesting. All these schools of tomorrow that innovate and that do no longer follow traditional pathways. So the vision for education, it can also help a lot of parents. It can also be an education at the same time for them. Yes, indeed, because whenever you understand that your child has the 4 dimensions, then as a parent, you're going to see to it that you supply them with other thoughts, even though the school in which our children are can also do the same thing. I was able to do this because I went to different places and during the school years, I brought in new elements and that were not supplied by the education they were receiving at that time. Ixin, what is your view on the democratic schools? You know this? No, I don't know the democratic schools. Is it the case, for instance, the children of Summerhill? Yeah, but that's the source in the very beginning. The Sudbury, it's where the children themselves choose what they want to do. They decide about their learnings and about the way they follow. The teachers are just there to accompany them and to guide them. No, then I don't know this more specifically, so I can't have a very precise opinion there. What is your, how do you see, or what is your viewpoint? How can we enable the national educational system to evolve? Oof, that's a very vast question. So what I see that there's a generation of parents which are looking to offer something different to the children. There are a lot of publications, a lot of books on this. And what I also see, only be at least 20 or 30 last years, there are some attempts to introduce new things. But for the time being, I believe that the structure we have doesn't enable us to change things overnight. And what we also forget, and we have to mention, is that the parents are the first wanting their children to learn something different from the things they learned at the time. And seeing the children doing something that doesn't look like the things we were doing. And unfortunately, are part of these people who were in primary doing things with doing a lot of mathematical exercise. And that's why I started this conference, and that's how I started. I have a vision. First, there is a vision. What is a child? What is a human being? What are we here for? What kind of society do we want to build for tomorrow? And this concept, this view on mankind and the world, it takes time, but we don't want something that is in total contradiction either with what exists in society today. A lot of there's the different books you've written, and the transmission is a continuous challenge. Yes, those who are in the system and those who try almost become dissidents trying after new things. It's asking a lot of energy, and to do this and to continue doing so. Nice. Well, she says, well, as a teacher, I'm stepping out of the system. What do? I cannot answer instead of Anais, but what I'm seeing, according to the echoes I had, I believe there's a crisis. A lot of people leave, and we've reached such a point that national education is recruiting teachers. To recruit new teachers, there are a lot of people asking the questions in the human sciences. The last edition, there was a poll, I don't know by whom it was done. They say that 60% of the teachers regret the choice they've made. And after 10 years of practice, only 10 years, they're already 40% to regret the choice of becoming a teacher. So these figures, I believe, should bring us to reflect on this and to ask ourselves what is happening. Some people do it because they're passionate about it, but then how come that they are really putting into question the choice they've made? The question here goes on. I love my job, but so when you know Bernard Collot, but there's also Philippe Nicolas, which is in the heart of national education. It's a fantastic piece of work, and that he will be there tomorrow. And a lot of people who are doing incredible things. There's also Mike, who should have been here yesterday, is working in the United States. He's trying to put or to apply everything he's learned in Finland. Yes, you need to be brave. Sometimes when we say that things will never change, well, I would like to recall I lived when there was still the Cold War with Russia. We said we would see this during our whole life, but no one would could foretell the fall down of the wall and the end of the Cold War. So perhaps one day this mammoth, this system, it's difficult to change, but who would be transforming itself to become more in adequation and how to be a better human being today. So perhaps the micro changes which are done here and there, at a certain time, they will lead to a real change. Just Anais regarding Michael Heinz, well, he wasn't here because he was taken to hospital. He has a food poisoning, and ever since have no news. So I'm still waiting to get news. But I'll keep you posted. So there are a lot of testimonies. It's how come it's magnificent what you do, etc., etc. How come you didn't hear more about it? So people are also referring to Finland and to Denmark. But how come we do not take inspiration of what is happening elsewhere when we see that a country is ranking first in the educational system and France is ranking 14th? Perhaps there's some things we could learn from the others. And it's quite complicated. There are a lot of reflexes we have to go and look further than our guard and see what is happening in the other countries. For instance, Canada was also quite in advance. Quebec on the introduction of a lot of pedagogical instruments for the relational and for the emotional aspects. But the criteria, the evaluation criteria ranking the country, they do not take into account all elements. So they came all. It might have some effects that are quite astonishing. Olivier, we talked about education, about the systems, etc., etc. Are there, or what can be implemented for everything individually without that system is changed? Yes, what is implemented is what we are already doing. We're numerous to do this the last decades, and when we talk about a new paradigm, when we talk Yves Michel, all the things, all those already eat differently, think differently, who grow things in their garden. And we are aware that according to this estimate, about 1 or 25% of the population already made it or took a step in this direction. We all would like this to go much faster, but this accumulation of people making different choices, that follow workshops, that read other books, that try another form of pedagogy, and people who support one another during this change. Because before we didn't have this. When there was a change, you were doing it in your little corner all by yourself. But now it enables people to link up, to support one another, for instance, in the French-speaking world, the whole French-speaking world. So I believe we have to continue along these lines if we feel that we have a mission, if we have the capacity of setting up a network. I believe they ought to do this. They will do it. So all the things we do, even individually in your family, at a local level, well, is part and parcel of what in the end will lead to a change. Karen says that's the effect of the colibri, of the hummingbird, and there are more hummingbirds in the world. So we have 6 or 7 more minutes. 7 minutes. So there's the sentence of Gandhi I'm thinking of now. And Gandhi said, with time, only love and the truth will triumph. So sometimes the efforts we make, the changes we try and implement, we do not necessarily see the results immediately, but we shouldn't forget that nothing is lost. All the efforts we make and all these means of making progress, are being added up. And we never know at what time it will reach the.
Ces changements-là vont devenir visibles, réels.
Il y a Catherine qui demande le nom de Rupert Sheldrake.
Sheldrake, ça s'écrit S-H-E-L-D-R-A-K-E, Sheldrake. Il a écrit de nombreux livres, dont un.
He wrote a lot of books. He wrote a book, L'âme de la nature, the soul of nature. It's an exceptional author, and his theory of the morphic fields, I'm always referring to it. Ariane, yes, finally, I had a question. It's very difficult to give a universal answer. We're all different, of course. It depends on the resources we have. And what I do in family, and that has a very big scope, it's the example we can give. Up to the age of 7, we tell your children. So if we put into practice if in our way of managing our health, the way in which we work with feelings and emotions, if we try and capture the information. And if we're a model there, we underestimate sometimes the impact it will have on your children. And very often I'm telling the parents that once they will become adults, they will transmit all the things you are. So, and all the things you taught them up to the age of 12, 13, the examples you gave will come up again. So there are a lot of thanks, Olivier. Very instructive, very precious magic, all the words. So thank you to all those listening to us, also including all these who will follow everything in a replay, because the time it is being broadcast, the time is different on each continent. Thank you for this global vision, and thank you, Oliver, to look at things globally and to take everything as one, a single, as a whole. So thank you for sharing this vision. So thank you, because I know that you did a phenomenal piece of work so that all this could finally be organized. That's my service. Pleasure. And then our next speaker, she's working with the bees, and she's bringing us, introducing us in the bee world. Bees, how the bee can teach us a lot of things about life. So it's immediately afterwards, and it will be in English. So we'll back into towards French translation. So we'll be listening in a couple of minutes to Annelieke van der Sluis. So Gandhi, really, that's also a very nice saying. It's the sum of all these efforts we're making, even in moments when the result perhaps is not yet visible as we wish. It will one day crop up, it will be shown, and so we have to continue on a daily basis. It's magnificent. So thank you, Oliver. Also, thank you, and the very best for those who've been listening to us. And so we still have a few minutes to drink something, to change languages, and then also to listen to Annelieke. So hope to see you soon. Sorry. Bye-bye, Oliver.